the information capabilities available.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, so the two classifications I've talked about are managed and limited, and we also have some proposed closed areas in the county. And these were developed in conjunction with the county and the state and the U.S. Forest Service. This is an example of one of those closed areas right here. And in the closed areas, we hope that there will be no motorized travel. This is the Elephant Lake proposed closed area. And most of these areas have had developed walking systems or cross-country ski systems or biking, or have other important wildlife features, wildlife waterfall refuge lakes, some of those sorts of things. So we do have some closed areas proposed in the county. And the table that you see below the three definitions is a quick summary of those closed areas. Again, in terms of the amount of DNR land that's in those, we did not have the ability to summarize the amount of county ground in some of those. The county, I'm sure with their efforts, could give us a total on some of that, but we did not have that available for this review. On the next page, you're going to see a color graphic, a pie chart. And that's basically a summary of how we developed, or a summary of basically our proposed designations. On state land, there was a total of over 800 miles of inventory routes, and on county ground, there was about 540 miles of inventory routes. System Forest Road, 37 miles on state, and almost 69 miles on county. And minimum maintenance road, 147 or so on state and 135 on county. Other route classifications, there was proactive closure, which would be basically our designated hiking or hunter walking or those types of trails. We have non-designated routes, and I'm trying to find something in the limited forest. They would be yellow in the limited forest here. And this would be a portion of the limited forest right here, and we have some non-designated routes. There's a little piece right there in yellow. Here's some more yellow. That would be our non-designated, and those routes would be available for ATV use for big game season. In the managed forest, they appear more in solid yellow instead of the checkerboard yellow. This would be a yellow trail right here. Various shades of green here on the screen. Okay, and we have a very limited amount of ATV and off-highway motorcycle designated trail in the county at present. At least that's the proposal. And the team looked actively for off-road vehicles, bigger trucks. We had tried to zero in on the range area where there was suitable ground, but the broken ownership pattern of the area with mining company, active mining operations, a little bit of undivided interest on both state and county made the ability to get much more than a 40 or a half a mile a route that you couldn't get to from here available for high or off-road type vehicles. We will be taking a further look at that. I'm sure when we go to public review, our off-road folks will have some proposals or ideas on where to situate some of them. So that quickly is a review of our classification, our draft and proposed classification. A combination of managed, for the most part, limited inside the national forest borders, and some proposed closed areas that have been managed that way for, in many cases, decades. with walking type trails. I tried to orient to the map a little bit. I'm going to just move the map up to the legend here. You have a legend in front of you, and we can leave this big map if that is of any help, or we can have additional big maps produced for distribution to the board. Okay, county and state forest roads, and this is going to include the regularly maintained roads plus minimum maintenance roads, would be shown in a solid green. We have some proposed ATV OHM trail, and that would be in the dash green. Other other motorized routes that we couldn't find the claimant on, whether it be township, county, or it may have been some private road out there, will be the ghosted out green. And the U.S. Forest Service portion that's open will be shown in the green path. One of the things in your handout is the U.S. Forest Service has just initiated their public review process with their first public review scheduled for the supervisor's office in Duluth, I believe on Wednesday. Their portion of the travel management plan, it's either the left of the Irish or the left of the land managers, is we're going to public review at approximately the same time for the state and county portion of the plan in St. Louis County and the U.S. Forest Service portion in St. Louis County. So the public is going to have the ability to take a look at these planning efforts in coordination and cooperation at about the same time. The Forest Service has made an effort to produce a map that shows our routes on their map, and we have tried to take their proposals and put them on our proposed map as well. So, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. A couple of quick questions before we get too far off or too far down the road. You talked about the federal plan coming forward and the exchange of routes. In that process, was there dialogue that looked at some of the connectivity to build some of these contiguous rails? That it seems to be the piece that people are asking for is destination type trails. So were we able to create a dialogue with the federal folks and come up with some of that type of trail?
We have a couple of proposals that I can zero in on to help answer that question.
Okay. And as you're doing that, I think possibly a lot simpler one, I look at a couple of these areas that you've got marked as closed. Is there any private ownership within any of those designated closed areas?
There is some private ownership.
And how does this affect that?
Okay, now the private owner would be given access permits to get to their private property in a closed area if they have routes or trails to it. One of the cases in point...
and use within the private properties within the confines?
Yeah, it absolutely does not affect use on the private property. Sometimes if you see the boundary chosen was to give a identifiable boundary, like a public road, so that the public knows that anything within that. We were looking for hard boundaries basically, and it's a balance between if you have private property within a hard boundary, it's easier for the broad public to understand where they should stay out of, but it may give the implication that their private land is affected when it's not. Their use on their own property is not affected one iota.
I just, in looking at the two parcels, I know there's private ownership.
Yeah,
at least some of them, so
we wrestle with that because sometimes then we try to put the line around the parcel, and then the public doesn't see it as a hard boundary on the public road or something. Okay. So it's a difficult balancing act, but by no means do we want to implicate private property owners in there.
Thank you, Dennis.
Yeah, one of the things, this concept of these various lines of being different designations, I'm wondering if the possibility of having a map that demonstrates what is going to be the final document, what is going to be the document of open trails, then with layovers on top of that that can suggest what the various things are, so that you could pull them off and go, oh yeah, now I understand what's going to be there. Because I've got to tell you, it is a big area, and it's very difficult to determine exactly what is what, and the legend is not exactly one or two items.
No, and there are a couple, actually.
And I don't know if you can do this. I was thinking of Mylar or something like.
Well, we could, and if we were GIS, if we all had GIS capabilities, that's what GIS does for the experts. They can put on different layers. But there are many, we can be open-minded to having it be in 4 panels, or we can talk to our GIS folks and maybe work informally to see, how do you like this layout best, or should there, we used to do oftentimes like 6 different maps depicting different things, where, and it's trying to find the right way to convey it. It's an art, and it's very difficult.
Okay.
And on the connectivity piece, if I can just expand on that question just a little bit, the one place that's non-designated here would be that Green Hill site, and do those non-motorized pieces affect the connectivity, or were we able to route around them?
I think without fail, they did not affect connectivity. Connectivity was something that the team thought pretty hard about, because we went to those public meetings and heard that as well. And
The Green Hill site was the one that in particular I was concerned about, but I appreciate
we can
that look.
you know, if we have time, we can look particularly at that and see
Okay.
if you have specific concerns there.
One of the areas that we tried to get the connectivity was in this area by Elephant and Moose Lake. Okay, this one has, or no.
Give me, Dennis, give me your.
I don't have one. I mean, I do, but it's not.
I got one more. Okay.
Starting
Right up in here.
something like this.
Okay.
And it crosses state, county, and federal land as part of the village trail, part of it.
And then another area where we tried to provide that connectivity was over here by the 200 road, and not, excuse me, Sheep Ranch. Right in this area, right in here.
Is that that spot where there's 100 feet between the trail and where you can go?
Camp 90 and Sheep Ranch, and there's a network of Forest Service routes in here that would provide some destination range. And there was another piece that we were at earlier there that was on all state, county, and federal ground. It was about a 10-mile, 12-mile piece that would provide the potential for 47 miles of destination riding just out of, you could trailer out of Orr and to a trailhead, and have 47 miles of possible tour type riding for the day, or a day and a half, or whatever. I've only got an ATV. I use it at the. I have a hobby farm. It doesn't get out very far, so I get about a quarter mile of driving a day. Okay, we've tried to explain the classification. We've tried to orient a little bit to the map. I know it's difficult at the scale that we have. Any suggestions for improvement for the public review, we'll try and incorporate those in how we present this. This particular map file would probably take 3 or 4 hours to download on dial-up internet. It's a very large file. If we try and reduce the file size, we lose a little bit of the, I'll say, detail, and with that, you don't have a complete product either. A lot of people have high-speed internet if they're in a community, and downloading something like this may take about 5 to 10 minutes on a high-speed internet line. The other thing would be is if they want it, we'll try and make DVDs available to the, or CDs available to the folks that request them. Okay, issues. We had a number of issues that we tried to incorporate as we went. One of the things that, and I'll try and zoom out here just a little bit.
Before you go to issues, at the bottom of the page,
At the bottom of the page.
that's where you have the pie chart.
Yes?
Are we looking at, is there, if in the limited and the managed, are we looking at on state land designations and St. Louis County designations of 300 miles in St. Louis County and 30 miles on the
State land.
state land?
Yes.
Is that what we're looking at?
Yeah.
And the 34 of closures, that says that's just, they're not added in here, right?
Correct.
Okay, good.
For the vast majority of this, over 1,300 miles, if it was taken a look at, there's probably over 1,100 miles that is still available for ATV use, either as forest access route, minimum maintenance road, system road, or a non-designated route in the limited forest.
And again, sorry to interrupt, but it gets so confusing. The non-designated route in a limited forest is only open to big game season. It's in essence an exception to the general rule, so for most of the year, they aren't able to use those routes.
And one of the planning efforts of both the county and the state is where we wanted to try and maintain access. We used the grandma and grandpa traveling on the Buick, using the Buick LeSabre to get in someplace to pick berries, strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, as kind of the absolute minimum standard. If it met that standard, we tried to keep it as a minimum maintenance road so that it would be available for that type of recreation use. The effort overall was to try and keep as much open and available to the public as possible. Okay, quick review of issues. There were a number of things that the planning team and the county came about, and you'll see that on the top of page 3 of the 4-page handout there. And let me try and explain what REAC is, R-E-A-C. Access routes with high REAC scores. REAC stands for Rapid Environmental Assessment Checklist. And one of the things that during this planning process, through the end of this year, this is our shortcut environmental review for creating these motorized recreation plans.
Yeah.
It was allowed by the legislature.
Yeah, I'll describe it a different way. It's where the process is exempted from environmental review, but we wanted to have at least a standard that we had some comfort with, and that's why we created the REAC. So there, even though we're completely exempt, we did want to take an analysis of that.
What was the C again?
I'm sorry,
The
Commissioner.
C on the
Checklist.
end.
Checklist.
What was the A again?
Access.
Rapid Environmental Assessment
Assessment.
Checklist. And it has 3 categories: low, medium, and high. Low REAC would basically be a minimum maintenance road, a system road, something that didn't have any problems or maybe wetland or wet areas really associated with it. A medium REAC might have occasional wet spots, seasonally wet areas. We get a rain event like we had this past fall, and some of these forest access routes may have a medium score, and they would be seasonally wet. A high REAC score is, I would say, characteristic of an area that would traverse a wetland. Might be a winter road. It has drainage issues associated with it that it can't support regular motorized use. a lot of the use that we're seeing in North St. Louis County has a fairly low level of use. A number of these trails are only used occasionally and most of the time in the fall for big game retrieval, getting people back into their stands or into an area of traditional hunting. In many cases, we tried to keep as many of those open as we could, hoping that the users, they're not allowed to rut, would use their choices and not travel when the road is or the access route is subject to damage. There's a number of other areas. I'm going to try and highlight a few of those. In this particular area, the unimproved stream crossings, we had a number of inventoried access routes that crossed trout streams and in many cases trout streams, or streams, in many cases trout streams, and they lack adequate culverts or bridges to cross them. People are using them, and some of these routes are used by people to access either hunting shacks on forest capital land, county land, or potlatch, or maybe their own private ground that they have. And our strategy there was, if it was on state land and it crossed an unimproved crossing, it may be closed. That private landowner, cabin leaseholder that has access across that trail into their piece of private land in behind would be given an access permit and would be instructed to improve that crossing so that it wouldn't have any additional environmental concerns. We have a unique thing that we've attempted, and excuse me, in this particular area, not a good multitasker, as you can see. But we have some areas here. This is an area there we can't designate on private ground. There's a lot of what appear to be trail disconnects. You can't get there from here, but there's really access routes across private land, in some cases industrial private land, either potlatch or forest capital, that provide access to these parcels. It exists on the ground. And Forest Capital Partners for sure they did not want this stuff displayed on their property. They're willing to tolerate the low levels of use that currently exist, and but they did not want it shown on a map. And they have that right. They're the private landholder. Here is a case right here where we have a proposed closed area. There's a trout stream in here somewhere that you can't get there from here, or you could, and it was open to here. There's a crossing through here. You can barely see the blue. There's a crossing, and it's closed beyond. Now that was one of our unimproved stream crossings right there. Okay, I'll zoom out again. Another novel approach that we tried to incorporate in the plan was what we called gated access, seasonally closed. No, wrong spot. Right up in here. This is the Bulldog Hansen area. It's an area that has gated access. This is a minimum maintenance road that actually comes through the center of that area with little spurs going off of it. And rather than gating every little spur, there's a gate out here on the main road that will be seasonally closed for bird hunting. and it'll be open for big game. The commissioner is mulling this proposal over as we speak. We don't have in this motorized planning process a real way of doing this, but he was very intrigued by the concept that we had developed here. And we have a number of these proposed. Yep.
Within that thought process, have you considered, since we have some overlapping seasons, have you considered allowing entrance in there, say a week before season for portable stands, those types of things? Or are you considering closing it like up until the day of season?
No,
Traditionally, we've been sort of a tradition of these things like September 1st, November 1st. And it's not in stone, but that's kind of what we're looking at.
Okay, and I mean, the obvious reason that I'm asking is because of for the white-tailed deer hunters,
Right.
that, you know, it with portable stands, it's
They're not so portable anymore.
well, they're not so portable, but I mean, getting them out there a week before season is fairly reasonable. I just want to make sure that we're accommodating that as we're looking at this, that we would at least allow some time for that. I like the concept. I think it's, I mean, I'm not familiar with that network, but I like the concept that it would be open to you know, that type of walking and grouse hunting, but again, make sure that we consider the deer hunters.
Now, there's been other proposals that our deer season coincide with the Wisconsin season.
Wisconsin season starts a week after.
Yeah, and if these were, and I don't know if that's a whole nother separate thing, but if that were come to pass, if these were gated, seasonally closed September 1 to November 1, after November 1, they would be available for a week, 10 days, maybe even 2 weeks before the season opens. Sometimes their season opens as early as the 4th or 5th of November, and sometimes as late as the 7th or 8th.
And it would essentially close these areas for bear hunting.
Right.
You know, and that's been obviously a piece of it.
But there'd be a revenue issue that would come up with coinciding with Wisconsin and Minnesota's.
I don't know.
I did a study for Minnesota Tower one time, and we were talking about forestry up here, and it does appear that there would be
Yeah,
a
I know it's
revenue
been
change.
talked about, but I don't know if it'll get anywhere. Okay, we have some proposed segments of state trail. And this is state snowmobile trail, part of the Arrowhead system and part of the Taconite system, that we're proposing be open to ATVs. The part of the Taconite system is probably down in that side lake to Big Aspen area. And
Outside of the sturgeon.
outside of the sturgeon, it's this area right down in here. In this particular planning process, what we did on these parcels of state land, we designated those routes. This is a Forest Service road, and they're proposing to have the Forest Service road open to ATV use. We designated the state pieces, minimum maintenance road. Here you can see one of our green dash ATV loops that would loop off of the Taconite if this proposal sees the light of day with the public. Here we have some additional routes on a piece of state ground next to Lake Meander. And then another network over here just before you get to Highway 53. This area right over here is the Big Aspen area, I believe, and it's a U.S. Forest Service designated ATV route currently. So this might get to some of the connectivity and a destination type ride, especially if it can be supported by a community like Side Lake, or you could trailer an ATV and go into something and then back around. So it has some opportunities there. We kept that in mind as we went around the county. And this involves designations on both state and county ground as well. The wood turtle, St. Louis River corridor, there was not a lot of state or county ground in that corridor, and Dave, if you could help me zero in on that.
Some of the members of the planning team have been involved with state threatened wood turtle and concern for its protection. And there is state and county land that butts up to the river, the St. Louis River. St. Louis River is a stronghold of that species. And so there was strong interest on the planning team in making sure we did what we could to try to ensure that species was adequately addressed in this plan.
So I
You
think
want to continue, Jim? Or-
yeah, and if you want to point out some of the things that we may have done here, I think.
It turned out there weren't that many inventoried trails or routes on state land close to the river. So there wasn't an awful lot that we felt we could do. We could take the step of actually closing state land and suggesting the county do the same. But for just primarily for logistic reasons and how scattered those parcels were and surrounded by private land, that didn't seem like a practical solution. So what we've done in talking with our enforcement folks is our non-game people know pretty much where the strongholds of these turtles are, and they work with enforcement to identify if there are issues, in particular nesting spots, for example, and then work with local folks to try to educate and shut things. If there's a particular trail, for example, that's causing issues, to close that down. Rather than doing anything kind of blanket, to target on where the issues really are and try to educate and enforce in particular areas.
Okay, on the back of this 4-page handout, there's 2 other issues. I briefly touched on the no off-road vehicle routes were identified, and that was, we specifically looked at the area along the formation for opportunities to incorporate some of that. The off-road vehicles aren't asking for an awful lot, but they do want to be considered in some of the planning efforts that we've had to this point. There is an area around Chisholm, and what we did is, where possible on state and county ground, we either left the routes open as access, or they may have been designated minimum maintenance, but we do not have much for ownership pattern here. This is a piece of state that you can't really get to. It's pretty wet ground. Here's a combination of state and county right in here. There's a lot of other state and county fractional ownership, undivided interest type ownership that exists along the formation, and because of that undivided interest, it's probably as much or more private land than it is state or county ground. It complicates anything trying to be achieved as far as some sort of writing opportunity.
And the other issue in these areas, if it's not gated or fenced right now because of open pits and stockpiles, that doesn't show on the map, but a lot of that is also closed off because of that mining,
Active mining.
or inactive mining both.
Did we consider, just glancing at this location, did we also consider there's a pretty major initiative in the Mining Hall Road that's pretty much cutting across from Mount Marion all the way over to Keewatin. Was that overlaid on any of this? So that, my concern is that we should definitely overlay that and make certain that we're not compromising any of the security of that.
Commissioner Nelson, a lot of that was also for private land also.
Yes, it is.
And not a lot of it on public. There was some on tax forfeit, which we granted a lease to them to do that.
Right.
In fact, they wanted easements to have total control of that because of what was going to happen.
Right.
But again, I think most of it is on probably mining company lands, which again would make it difficult for them to allow us to do it.
The vast majority, and the reason I bring it up is with the Mesaba Trail and the issues that we've had for commissioners that aren't on that, on the rail authority. It's we've got some spots where the trail is going to cross the Hall Road, and the Hall Road's going to cross the trail, and it's working out some of the details of that have been fairly complicated, because it's not really, none of this activity is conducive with 280-ton hull packs, those types of vehicles. Thank you for, just needed to know that was part of the process.
Okay, one of the last issues that we dealt with, or tried to deal with in the course of doing this effort, is to identify pieces of ground where we need to pursue easements with private industrial partners. And this area right in here, you can see there's a major disconnect from here to over here. This is through Forest Capital Properties. And in our planning effort, if it was Potlatch or Forest Capital, we tried to identify these as opportunities that the various management agencies, the county or the state, would try and pursue in a separate other process. We can't show them as open because there's no easements or permission that has been granted at this time. People are going to know that there's a major route from here to here. Anybody that's been up in that area. But because there are no easements on that stretch, they can't be shown.
Forest Capital doesn't require that public access be available, and therefore easement's not necessary?
Commissioner, I can take a stab at that if you like.
You know where I'm going here.
Yeah, well, and that's an interesting one, because in Coochian, if we go over to Coochian County, we've got the 51,000 acre easement where part of what the state and the private parties paid for was access across those lands, be it for some forest roads and some recreational opportunities. Now, parcels such as these that are not part of that easement program, we're struggling with them a bit on access, and this also ties into this whole other process that's going on regarding prescriptive easements that the counties and the state have over private land by traditional use for decades and decades and decades. And you don't want to always bring those things up because they're sensitive, and if we can take a global view on some of these and they work with us, you might get the public benefit, the management benefit by doing it that way. So,
Okay, I got it.
Okay. The last piece of information was just going to be to try and tour our proposed closed areas, and we can do that. We have we'll start up here in the northwest part of the county. There is an area of this particular location right up here. An area bounded by a stream in the northwest here, a snowmobile bike route on the south over to another stream over here on the east side. And we're calling this the Ash River West parcel. And these pieces are listed in the table on the front page there. This particular piece, there is one, what we called private 80 in there, and that private landowner would be given an access permit to get in there. And the rest is Forest Capital land. And Forest Capital was in agreement with something like this. There is no county land involved in this piece, and it is proposed to be limited. The area up there is a combination of high rocky ground and low wetland swamp. Some of the area you can't quite get to from here, and if you did, you probably wouldn't be able to go very far if you did get there. It would be available for big game season. A nested limited classification within the managed forest. It is not conducive to the, we called it the LeSabre test. The Buick LeSabre would not be able to traverse these routes without getting marooned.
It's an isolated area, right? It's not creating.
It's an area that borders Voyageurs National Park. This is the Blacktop Ash River Trail that goes into the Ash River community. And then this particular piece over here is proposed to be closed. It's a small parcel of state, small when you take a look at the size of the geography here, about 70 acres of state land with a series of hiking, hunter walking, and ski trails on it already.
And Commissioner, I hate to chime in from behind you like this. I apologize for I don't know how to get proper attention here. But I wanted to speak to that issue, a couple of those issues there, and to preface something that the Commissioner cares about these areas a lot, because one of the themes he always says is, let's not set the public up to fail. And so he's very open and accepting of these areas that are different, that we're carving out here. But he wants to make sure we're doing it in a way that doesn't really confuse people. So that's one thing. The second one is clearly on this one, and we asked the team flat out, they weren't trying to create a buffer on the Voyageurs. There were other reasons there, because we've got other issues with, the litigation and things that we're working together on. But he, when we met with him last week, he didn't get through all of these, and he's still looking at them. An example of how he looks at it is where there's a campground that we want to keep ATVs out of. He'll ask the question, well, do we have other tools that we have to accomplish that management objective without drawing another circle? And so those are some of the things that, as he reviews it, he's looking at, and we're open to that too. Looking what the objective is on the ground and making it make the most sense to folks out there.
I just don't want anybody to be looking at a significant area somewhere and having them think that this was designed as a buffer zone, which creates a whole new set of issues, as you well know, and I'm sure everybody does around the table, that I don't have any problem with isolated areas that absolutely talk about things that are unique to that particular area, but in fact, if it becomes consistent, or they're back-to-back, or elongated across a particular area around a specific border, that begins to start setting into a position that says, well, wait a minute, we're actually creating a buffer zone, and that's a wrong approach.
I agree.
Yeah. Good, because we'll have issues with some other areas where buffer zones are being discussed.
Okay. These are two of those spots that we made proposals on. Let me zoom in.
Talk about this one, Jim?
Sure.
We call this the Echo Lake here. This is a Echo Trail along the north, Forest Service Road on the west. It is open to highway licensed vehicles. This is a network of trails that has been developed in conjunction with the Forest Service and the county. County land is this colored here. And developed and maintained for hunter walking opportunities, particularly bird hunting opportunities, and we want to see that kind of opportunity maintained. How many acres?
Yeah, almost 2,000 acres.
It's pretty good size, yeah. We tried to find, try to identify places where you could walk all day. I think some people, I work for Division of Fish and Wildlife, and we hear from people that are looking for, we hear from a lot of people, but one of the groups of people we hear from are folks that feel like they're being opposed upon by motorized vehicles. And so, and there's people on both sides of that, but we try to identify some areas where we have a history of providing a non-motorized recreational opportunity. There's forest management that's happening, so there's opportunities to harvest game species. And especially if there's been some kind of cooperative thing going on, those seem to be good opportunities.
Steve?
You know, as long as you're on that group of people, what else did they want? What else did you hear from them? Because, I mean, you have, you know, these closed areas. Were there other closed areas that they wanted, or?
Most of the closed,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, one of the things is with our process, the way it is now, we kinda go out there with a blank slate and get some good information, craft a plan. And now I expect coming out of meetings like this, and as we do the publicity and have the public comments, we'll be getting those saying, hey, what do you think about these other areas over here? Or what do you think about expanding that? So we'll get that input. As to what we've had to this point, I don't know if we've had much beyond what the teams discussed.
And we had, as Jim mentioned, we had a series of open houses almost a year ago. And, you know, frankly, they were not particularly well attended, and they tended to be folks very local to where the meeting was. So in those forums, we didn't hear from very many non-motorized folks.
Thanks.
Sure.